say that I was, the quiet kid in the back of the room who did fairly well, went under the radar, never really had to go to intervention, but was not naturally, I would say, I don't have a high IQ. I worked hard and got good grades. When I decided to become an educator, I went through all of the motions that all educators go through. I got trained traditionally in a college setting. I went and did my internship, got into a classroom. They gave me all the materials and said, here is your scope and sequence. This is what page you're supposed to be on. Just follow it to the T and everything will be fine. And so that's what I did. I got into a room and I said everything that was in blue that it said to say, and I had the kids do all the assignments that it had them do. And then yet at the end of the day, 50% of my kids were still not proficient. And I was getting glowing reviews as a teacher. I would get, my principal would come in a couple times a year and say how wonderfully I was doing. But I knew that wasn't the reality. I may have been, a good mentor for my kids. I may have been following the pages like I was asked to. I was a good employee, but 50% of my kids were not proficient. And there was something wrong there. There was something systemically wrong with how we were teaching kids. And it wasn't until I started working for James Dent, who is currently the CAO at Navigator Schools. He was then the principal of Elliott School when I was teaching there. And he knew that there was a better way. He knew that what we were doing wasn't the most effective thing for students. So he started his research with visiting other schools that were doing data-driven instruction, that were going off script and personalizing their instruction to where the kids needed it most. And I was kind of his experiment, his coaching experiment. So we all went to visit Victorville down in Southern California, and several other schools who were showing, major strides in the work. And we wanted to see if we could replicate that. So he came into my classroom, got me the same tools they had, data, clickers, I guess they called them back then, way back when, so that not only I could teach, but I could get in the moment data and I could pivot on that data, reteach where I needed to, move on quickly where I needed to, not belabor anything they already understood. And so, that's where coaching started. That's where I realized that it's not that following a script is good for some of the kids. But it's not good for all of the kids. We have to figure out what the kids need and give them exactly what they need and exactly the doses they need it in. So he started experimenting with coaching. And I remember at one point, he even put a headset on me. So like a news reporter, I had a headset on, and as I was doing the instruction, he'd be circulating the room and he'd give me live coaching. You need to be over here. You need to do this. You haven't done that. And so I think that's where it all began. And I think Navigator has done a really good job of using data to meet kids where they are, and also coaching teachers on how to use data to meet kids where they are. Two things are, the same exact coin. If you don't have one, you can't have the other.
So tell us more. Can we go discipline by discipline? I'd love to hear a little bit about math and then talk a little bit about literacy, because we do sometimes find that the strategies are a little bit different.
Okay.
So within math, what kind of data are you looking at and what are you doing with it?
Okay. Can I reverse it? Can we
Yes.
go reading first? And,
Yes.
and I'm doing that purposely because I just feel like that is the most important thing a school can get right. And if you get that right, everything else is going to be easier from that point.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
K-1-2 is where I would say that we put most of our intervention energy, most of our like when we started Navigator Schools, how are we going to get kids reading by the time they leave second grade, so that when they enter third grade, they're reading to learn and not learning to read. And that was like the number one priority. We did it 100 different ways. We had small group instructors like paraprofessionals pulling kids out of class. We had them pushing into class. We had our SPED team on board. We had administrators. We would go into the classrooms and teach small groups. So it was all hands on deck while we were in the sandbox, while we were figuring out what works best. We realized very quickly that reading foundations is the key. So creating a model, creating a system where students are getting at least 2 doses of reading foundations a day, if not 3 doses a day, was essential in their success and student success. So the way that we landed was a 3-center blended rotation where the teachers teaching reading foundation at the teacher center. Students then rotate to a center where a paraprofessional, or we call small group instructors, because they truly are teaching the kids as well. They're doing reading mastery, so a 2nd dose of reading foundation right there. Then the students move into their 3rd center where they're doing a adaptive blended learning, and we use Lexia. So that's a 3rd dose of reading foundations.
What was the teacher doing in her foundation station?
So the curriculum that we currently use is reading A to Z. And so there is a constant data feedback loop that's happening in that teacher center that's informing that teacher what lesson that group should be on, whether they should skip a couple lessons, whether they need to stay on a lesson longer, whether they need to go back. So that center is your number 1 data center. If kids are getting the silent E, we're moving them on to, we're skipping them up a couple lessons, we're figuring out exactly where they are. And that data can then be translated over to the SGI, the paraprofessional, to ensure that they're in the right spot of reading mastery that's complementing what they need in reading foundations. And so I would say it's less to do with the Lexia blended data. We put a lot more stock in the teachers' quantitative and qualitative data that they're taking every single day in the center. As opposed to, I mean, to be honest with you, when they sit down and take a BPST, we already know where they are. We almost don't even have to sit down and give a kid the BPST because the data that's being taken at that station, they know exactly what letter sounds that those kids know. They know exactly what digraphs are known or unknown. It's already so doing a BPST or doing a fluency test is often just a
confirmatory.
Confirmatory reaffirmation of what they already know.
But it does sound like you're saying your centers are in sort of entirely oriented in those grades around foundations. Is that accurate?
That is accurate until students are reading fluently. So there is a shift from reading foundations into reading comprehension. And it's kind of it's a muddy little shift, I guess you would say, because there will be groups of students who are ready for that, ready for guided reading, right? Ready to do those small chapter books, and yet there's still some gaps in reading foundations that are going to need to address, currently. And so there's going to be a point there where you're doing both of them at the same time and then shifting them into guided reading and reading comprehension. So you could have a teacher that's teaching 2nd grade that has 2 groups that are doing reading comprehension at both the teacher center and the paraprofessional center, and 1 group doing reading foundation still. So it really is meeting the students where they are.
really helpful to hear. And so by doing this, you talked about the sort of 50% of students that weren't succeeding in the way that you hoped in your own classroom. Do you feel like you all have at this point gotten to the point where you are at 100% of students are mastering these foundational skills?
I would say that we are never at 100%,
Mm-hmm.
yet we are doing everything that in our power to get to 100% is the target. It's always the target. We never want the target to be less than 100%. However, if we don't hit 100% of kids being on target and at mastery, we know that it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of altering an intervention. It's just a matter of having a student services team working on other ends of the whole child. Like there are other things that we can do, and we are doing.
Okay. So zoom us back just a little bit from that description for your foundations and tell us, what has that taught you about generally what works? Like as we as an education community are preparing to welcome back to school students in whatever form that may take, what is it that we need to sort of remember is most important?
So I think I'm going to twist it a little bit and say what doesn't work. So what we have found that doesn't work is teaching students how to read, teaching students reading foundations all together at the same pace with the whole class at the same time. So let's say you're doing Silent E. Let's say that that is the standard. Well, you've got some kids who have already mastered that, and you've got kids who are still working on letter sounds. And to do this as a whole class instruction is just not economical. It's just not what the kids need. So I would say our biggest learning is making sure to push reading foundations into small groups so that students are getting, the model is an intervention model. That 90 minutes is not only an intervention model for the students who are struggling, but it's also an acceleration model for students who need, who are ready for that type of rigor.
And beyond that 90 minutes, is there an additional intervention infrastructure?
Yes. So we also have after school intervention where students can get yet a fourth dose of reading foundations if they need it. And so I know that sounds really hardcore, doesn't it? Like 4 doses of reading foundations potentially in a day for a struggling student. And I would say, yeah, it is a little hardcore, but if you change the pace, if you make it exciting, if you bring joy to learning how to read, if kids are working in the right zone where they feel challenged but not frustrated, you're creating an environment where doing 4 doses of reading foundations is going to successfully get them to be able to read by the time they leave 10th grade.
And what, take us then into comprehension. Do you feel like you have a similar sense of confidence about what it is that leads to the success in comprehension?
Yes, I would say that we have taken a lot of our learnings from school and their guided reading. So when students are in K-1-2, that is what we do whole class. So we do reading comprehension to make sure that, our kiddos that are getting so much of this reading foundation, we want to make sure that they're not missing out on reading comprehension as well. So doing read alouds and making sure that we're hitting all of those power standards for reading comprehension. So by the time they're ready to transition from reading foundations into guided reading with reading comprehension, it's not like these standards are brand new to them. They have done it through the read aloud as well. And so I would say, again, creating a model in a classroom where even within reading comprehension, where students are reading text that is at their rigor level, but not frustration level, has been incredibly powerful for us. I mean, it is, I can't say that there's not other ways to do that. Should kids be reading grade level text as well? Absolutely. And we have a block where kids are getting grade level text, and they're getting challenged in that way as well. So, you know, it goes back to that old balanced literacy approach, but I do feel like the way we have structured guided reading in our K-5 model, there has been less need for after school intervention for students because the model itself is addressing intervention.
And take us over to mathematics. What do you all do there, and what have you seen work?
So again, we have a very similar model in mathematics where we have a 3-center rotation. The teacher is doing the direct instruction, and that teacher is gathering data constantly. Again, when we get to our Friday quiz, it's just reconfirming what the teacher already knows, the data that the teacher already has down through, you know, aggressive monitoring, tracking, not watching. Then the student goes over to the paraprofessional station where our small group instructors do word problems with them. And then they go into ST Math as their blended learning program. We also have IXL, we have Reflex Math, and some teachers are also using Khan Academy. So we do have some prescriptive blended learning programs that teachers
And what is the core curriculum that teachers are using in their station?
Currently, it's self-created. So Navigator has always built their curriculum from the ground up. In this new world of hybrid instruction and distance learning, we are going to be making a shift from our homegrown curriculum to we will be piloting Zern next year.
And have people been using that in a distance context?
We have not used it yet. We started a pilot this year, and it was very quickly cut off because of situation. And so we didn't really get to do a full pilot. So we're kind of just going on a hope and a prayer that this is going to be really great for us, because we need something that students can physically take home, something that has a digital LMS, a learning management system, that we can be tracking that data even when in their homes. The way that we have currently created our curriculum, it was created for tracking, not watching. It was created for a teacher to be able to circulate and take data in the moment and be able to pivot. So now that we may not be face to face and we may be in a distance situation, we need to be getting that real data all day long, even if we can't be standing over the student and tracking, not watching.
I think Zern is well matched to the design of your classrooms as you've described it too. One other question, going back to reading for a second. So it sounds to me like your focus on data and on really your entire instructional program is very grounded in teachers being very clear on sort of where they're driving students and aggressively monitoring and supporting that journey. When it comes to comprehension, what is the end goal that teachers are monitoring towards? I understand what it is in foundations. You know, there's a very clear skills progression there. But like, what does the win in comprehension look like? And what are they, what data sources are they using to monitor there?
So our win in reading comprehension is that students be able to demonstrate, defend, and debate their claims.
So it sounds like it's connected to expression.
Yes. So that holds true in reading literature and reading information. And so, you know, we use very similar rigorous questions to the Common Core assessments that they take at the end of the year. But it's not just about answering the question correctly. It's about the discourse. It's about the discussion. It's about debating each other's answers. It's about critically thinking through,
Mm-hmm.
um, just through everything.
Mm-hmm.
And when a teacher is able to sit back and just basically facilitate a discussion, not lead a discussion, not be the one that's talking, but be the one that's sitting back and listening to the kids demonstrate, defend, debate their answers with one another, and just be able to throw in a targeted question every now and then to help move the conversation along.
Mm-hmm.
It's in that moment when I'm in the classrooms that I know that we've arrived. When you just listen to that student discussion in a second grade, third grade classroom. I'm not even talking about our 7th and 8th graders. They're having these discussions in second and third grade. Second and third grade, and it's just mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And so tell us, just a final question, how are you all thinking about the return to school in the coming year? And, are you leveraging the same kind of instructional program that you have used? Are there like structural modifications you're making based on any anticipation of learning loss?
So we're trying to keep things as similar to our original model as possible. So in thinking about a hybrid model, the potential, likely potential of a hybrid model, we are deconstructing our entire model and putting it into 2 buckets. Like, what are the things that are most impactful face-to-face, and what are some of the things that could be done virtually or remotely? And also, if it's in the second bucket, is it done better synchronously or asynchronously? So we've had to kind of like categorize everything that we're doing in our model. We want kids to have that same consistency. We think the elements of our model is what has been so successful for us. So we want to keep that as consistent as possible. And so, although we have not made a concrete decision on whether or not it's going to be like an A/B day or it's going to be half days, where we haven't landed on exactly how much time and how many days they're going to be face to face, we do know what parts of the model are we're going to prioritize face to face. And we're also going to be prepared for the inevitability that it might be all distance learning. And when you think about that, the thing that is really hard to move out of face-to-face is reading foundations. So when I said like how we started this conversation with reading foundations, like we're right back to it at the end of this conversation. It's like,
especially in those grades.
Yeah. How without a teacher face-to-face student interaction are we going to get these little guys 4 doses of reading foundation in a way where we're not losing too much ground? And it's the challenge that we continue to demonstrate, defend, and debate every day in our leadership meetings.
I think it is the right place to be focusing, and we saw some really heart-wrenching data last week about the long-term impact that disrupted schooling has for young kids in particular, not just for them, but also for their children. Like, it's a multi-generational impact. And so I do think it is the place for disproportionate focus and energy and attention. Heather, thank you so much for talking with us. I really enjoyed this discussion. Heather Parsons at Navigator, and talking about rethinking intervention. Thanks so much.